Welcome to Jumpstart Your Joy, a podcast that looks at the inspiration, intention, and actionable steps to help you jumpstart joy in the world, in your life, and in other people's lives. This is your host, Paula Jenkins. Welcome to episode 207 and the start of season 5 here on Jumpstart Your Joy. I'm really excited to be back and excited to be sharing these new ideas for season 5 with you. This episode is all about how you are always in choice. So it'll be about choices we make, how we can choose things for ourselves, and some of the new things that I've been experiencing around the role of choice in my life. Now, if you have been listening to Jumpstart Your Joy for a while, you'll know that season 4 was all about looking at the inspiration, intention, and action that come about when you want to make joy a part of your everyday life. And what I realized as I was looking at that framework, which I still love and I think is so powerful, is there's also a little bit of a nuance in there that maybe I haven't explored a lot. And it has to do with choice. If you have been listening for a while, you'll know that the cornerstone quote that I keep going back to about the show and about joy itself is that joy does not simply happen to us. We have to choose joy and keep choosing it every day. And this is by Henry Nouwen, who was a professor at Yale and has written a lot of amazing books. And I feel like this is just a quote that, kind of like Brene Brown's face down in the arena quote, like, nope, this one's mine. And it really does make me happy to have it to go back to. And so it was that word of choice in that quote that made me think, I think there's more there. There really is. And I think there's something in between each of those 3 steps that we looked at in the last season that involves a choice. So we are inspired by something and we choose to make it an intention that we do more of it in our lives, which also involves the choice of taking action upon it. So without making those choices within those tiny little gap moments is one of the things I've heard them called, like that time in between when you have an impulse and you make a reaction to it. So it could be in your brain or it could be in your body and you're like, oh, I can make a little decision here. It's really about that moment of that choice that you can make in between each moment. And so we'll be looking at it in some big ways and in some small ways this season. I'm also really excited because kind of simultaneously to when I was deciding to make choice the focus of season 5, the guests that were lining up were all really amazing people that had important things to say about mindfulness and how to consider finances as an entrepreneur and how to choose happiness in your life. So those are the first 3 that you'll hear this month as well. And that's Oren Jay Sofer and Kedma O and Annabelle Bender. And I'm really excited to bring these conversations to you because they really are aligned with this idea of choice. So before we get to kind of the meat of this episode, let's do a little check-in. Since it's been a spell, of course, I'm Paula Jenkins, the host here at Jumpstart Your Joy, and we are officially in the 5th year of this show. You can find more about me and the show at jumpstartyourjoy.com. And of course, podcasters love a good show notes. And what is it, you ask? Show notes are where the podcaster kind of lays out all the stuff that's in the episode for you. And if there's any links that maybe I talk about, or there'll be a couple books I'm sure that come up, you can look for them and the link to them in the show notes. So that's why those are fun. It's kind of like you don't have to take notes. You can just go to the ones we wrote. So that's at jumpstartyourjoy.com/season 5. And while you're there, the other thing that I've been having so much fun with that I didn't really think would be this much fun, if I'm totally being honest, is my newsletter, which is 3 Joyful Things. Usually comes out on Thursday. I actually used to call it 3 Things Thursday, but then a couple times it went out on the wrong day, and then I was like, well, we're just changing the name. I'm choosing to change the name. So 3 Joyful Things. And what it does, it gives me this really interesting space to start to look at some of the deeper themes that I'm seeing in each of these episodes. Because there's a lot of thought and background and pondering and research that goes into each episode or each conversation with someone. And it's a lot of fun to be able to dig in and look at. Last season, for sure, it was inspiration, intention, action. I'll probably keep up that cadence and then maybe add the thing of where are you in choice here. So you can sign up for that on the homepage. There's a picture of a puppy or at the bottom of the show notes. Just sign up for the newsletter and you will be included. That's once a week. And the other really exciting thing here is that as I speak, I am, or as you're listening, I'm headed to Atlanta, Georgia to speak at She Podcast Live, where I will be doing the Creative Content Jumpstart session, and super excited about that and honored that they invited me to speak. And what I'm most excited about is the part of my session that's called Where My Pitch Is At. That's a P. Don't get nervous. Yes, I didn't say the other word. So we're going to practice some pitching at She Podcast. So if you're there, please come. It's Sunday the 13th at, I think it's 10:30. So I will see you all there. And if not, I'm sure you will find pictures of all of this on the Instagram at Jumpstart Your Joy. So let's dive into this week's content, which is You Are Always in Choice. And there's been so many interesting things that have happened since we had the last new episode. And really, some of it has to do with the old saying of, when the student is ready, a teacher will appear. And I feel like that's been playing out in my life again and again over the summer. I had this really unique experience where I got to have an Akashic reading, which if you are not familiar with that, so the Akashic Records are the records of one's soul, and they are written, I don't know where, but all of your thoughts, all of your actions, everything that your soul has done since the beginning of time has been written on this record. And there are readers in this earthly realm that can read them for you and get in touch with your guides. And I will tell you that I may have had a little bit of doubt in my mind if this could actually be true. Like, is this really possible? And does it actually work? And after my experience with it, I'm just going to say it was pretty profound. I was surprised at the level of things that the reader was bringing forth from my guides that were spot on. Like, even if you'd done Google searches on me, you would not have found some of the things. So, whatever, we can choose to believe in it or not. I think it was a very true reading. One of the things that my guides brought forth to me was this idea of releasing things, which was really interesting to me because they said you have a lot of things that you're holding on to, and from like kind of a psychological prospect or a psychological way, it's good for you to start releasing because you are holding on to things too tightly. And I think that's true. I can see that now very clearly in my life and how that was playing a role. And so their suggestion, and one of my practices over several weeks, was every night I went into a journal and for 5 minutes just wrote out things that I'm going to release and, let go of and be free of. This was really interesting, and I totally encourage you guys to try this because what I noticed was I'd write on the top of the page, I am releasing, and then I was just a brain dump. Like I was not being judgmental of the thoughts that came out, and I was trying to just go with the flow, kind of in the spirit of these guides told me to do this, so I'm just going to go with what comes out. And I noticed the first entries were all very superficial, top of mind, things that I wanted to release that were maybe very everyday type things. And then as the time went by, like I would dive deeper and deeper into things that maybe were heavier or that I had noticed had been like on my heart for a really long time, or past things that maybe I had just never resolved and that deserved to be let go, that weren't serving me anymore. And finally, I just got to this place where I didn't really have that much left to write. And I was at this place where I can now receive. I mean, that was basically where I got to, was like, thank you for this strange gift that I have received. And I feel good now. And it's really lovely to get to that spot. So if there's anyone out there who is listening and you feel like that might be an interesting practice for you, go for it. It was really cool. I feel like it opened my eyes to a lot of things. And so I also want to point out here, that was all a choice. Like I chose to look at it. I chose to be present as I was noticing what I was releasing. I chose to see what stories I was acknowledging were present in my life. So what things I been telling myself and believing and acting as if they were true. And so as I released them, I was choosing to let go. And I think that's really important, is to notice that the role of choice there was central. Right? I had to choose to participate in the practice, and I had to choose to participate in the releasing of the things. And then I had to choose to notice that there was a lot more space and room in my life. And that felt really nice. And it also made room for other things to be dealt with, which ties into the second part that came out of this Akashic reading, which was my guides told me that I was a full stop game changer as far as not allowing some of the ancestral BS to come into the future any further. Instead of me being someone who's going to pass on trauma, we could say, there's been a history of alcoholism in my family, some of the other stories that we tell ourselves, all of that stops here. And what's interesting to me is I kind of had already sensed this. I actually had a conversation with a friend just this last week. I don't drink. I'm pretty much a sober person. It's not really a conversation I have because it's a decision I made a while ago, but a lot of it does have to do with I don't want to bring that into my life and into my family's life. I don't know what would happen, but I just don't care to even bring it in. And so the other thing about me, if you guys have been following for a while, is that I was diagnosed with PTSD after the birth of my son. And I decided full stop, it's kind of even the birth of this podcast, was what I was experiencing at that time was not acceptable to me. And I knew I needed to get help. And so full stop, I said, I'm not bringing this into my own life and my family's life to the best of my ability. Now, of course, there's always that human layer. We are not perfect. I shared a little bit about this one in the end of season 4, I believe, is that I kind of identified that my husband and I were working under this story of we were always feeling like we were holding our breath and waiting for the next bad thing to happen. Now, I couldn't tell you what the bad thing was. And the really interesting thing about it was that I also actually had the proof that things were really great, and they are really great. And so it was a choice, here's again, that's this word, a choice for me to continue to believe and act as if something bad were about to happen. And I realized this is no longer serving me. This is exhausting. This is tiring. This is awful to stay in this space where I'm acting as if and choosing to act as if something is unfortunate, bad, whatever is about to happen to us. And so we've let it go. And the other thing that my husband and I have done recently is we realized that some of our communication style was so very different that we were often totally misunderstanding each other's intent. And so next week, you're going to hear from Oren Jay Sofer, and his book is about nonviolent communication. Now, that doesn't mean there's actually violence involved, but and there certainly wasn't in our situation, but how do we peacefully speak to each other? And so my husband and I have been reading this book to each other out loud, which has been this really beautiful way to say, hey, we are choosing something else. We're going to try on a different way of speaking to each other, and we're choosing to be different. And we're kind of at that space now. Part of Oren Jay Sofer's principles are to come at things from a place of curiosity and care. And so that's where we're at. We're how can we be more curious about this? How can we show that we care for each other more? And it's been really lovely. And all of this comes from this choice. I chose to have my Akashic Records read, I chose to get into this thing and accept that maybe it's time to release all these things. And then I have now chosen to take a look, be curious, and hold very delicately these things of where can I be a full stop change agent here? And it's kind of exciting. And of course, it's slightly terrifying. And that's where always the magic happens. But I guess I'm sharing that with you guys to say, maybe there's something in your own life that you could say is no longer serving you and that you might like to release. And I'll ask you that question here. And then here's one of my things that I would very much like to do this season with all of you is I'll put that into the Facebook group. And so go look for it. I'll start putting links in the email too, if you're not a member yet. But let's start to have this conversation, because the other piece about it is that when we choose to share these things with other people, when we look for the community around these things, we are going to find more joy. You're not alone. And I know you're here to find more joy if you're tuning in. And so how do we do that? Well, we start pulling back the layers of this onion, kind of like I did with the releasing of things. But how do we get closer to the heart of it? And how do we get closer to the heart of joy? So that is kind of what's been going on with me. And it's all very interesting. The other piece is that when I have chosen to release so many things, then it's been this really lovely bookend of it is also receiving many things. And having done the work about what am I going to release and who do I choose to be right this minute has brought me into the space where again, a little back note or a little context for people who maybe don't know my story that well, I left my full-time 9-to-5 job in January of this last year to be a full-time podcast producer and coach. And yeah, when I started out, I had one full-time client and knew that I would get more. Like I just had full faith. And over the course of having released all of that, I have also just signed on 3 more clients and had an inquiry from a 4th, which really is starting to build this amazing boutique kind of agency offering around podcasting and podcasting production, which is really exciting and really a delight for me. And so I will put this out there as well, that kind of the vision that I hold for it and its Jumpstart Podcasting is that it is this lovely gathering of people and shows that are all the voices of game changers and all shows that are people who are doing things just a little bit differently in this world. They're choosing to follow their own heart and follow the call of whatever it is that's on their hearts. And some of the way that they're doing that is through a podcast. And it's going to resonate with lots of women, and it's going to resonate with lots of people. And it is going to question and challenge kind of whatever business space they are in. It's going to turn it on its head a little bit. And so I'm really proud of these shows. The women that run them are frankly completely amazing. And I feel like with each one of them, they are a friend and somebody that I admire and somebody that I delight in and somebody that I feel beyond lucky to work with. And there's choice in that too, because there's this really beautiful space in which they have chosen to reach out to see if I might be able to help them. And then I get to choose them and say, yes, I would love to work with you and you are a perfect fit. And how is this amazingly possible? So there's been that, and that business has just blossomed. And I'm really excited about that too. And again, I mean, if you look at the creative side of all of this and the choosing of things, is this really was a series of baby steps that has gotten me here, which I have a feeling will be an entirely separate episode of how do you slowly build something and what are the small choices that are involved along the way. So there's that. And if you have a podcast and you're like, yeah, I'm in personal journals, or I wish I could find someone to help me with this, well, here I am. You found her. So I think we will rest right there. It's really exciting to be back. And as you can tell, I think I'll be infusing this season with some more about my own story and what I'm seeing as far as choice goes. I'm excited to share that. I hope you will join me in the Facebook group and answer the question of like, what can you let go of that is no longer serving you? Where can you be in choice about who you want to be today? How do you want to show up and what feels right for you? So if you want to get links, I mentioned the book by Oren Jay Sofer. I can link up to what the Akashic Record is. You can find the show notes for this episode at jumpstartyourjoy.com/season 5. And while you're there, of course, you're going to want to sign up for the 3 Joyful Things newsletter. You can find that on the homepage and at the bottom of those show notes when you're there on the website. This week's newsletter will break down a little bit more about how we are always in choice, because I think it's so important to start to play with that idea in kind of a more meaningful way. Next week on the show, I'm really, really honored and excited to have Oren Jay Sofer on with me. He is a mindfulness master, and he has written the book about Say What You Mean, which is all about nonviolent communication and how to really get at the heart of a conversation that matters and to say the things that are really on your heart. I think you guys are going to love him so much. I'm blown away, and his book is also really good. So if you have time between now and then, you could run out and buy his book, which link in the show notes, and maybe follow along a little bit because it's really an inspiring book. So I hope you'll come on back for Oren's interview next week. And until then, I hope that your days are filled with so much joy.